directors. I'm also president of the Delta Conveyance. We call it the Delta Conveyance Authority, but it's actually the Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Joint Powers Authority. Yes, and so that's for basically designing the Delta Conveyance, the potential Delta Conveyance. And so I will spend some time talking about that because that happens to be something that is highly controversial, but I think we do need to learn more about it, generally speaking. So can you hear me okay in the back of the room? Yes, good. Okay, so let me get this off. Okay, whatever's going on, I got it. So we will just get rid of this. And there we go. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to do a part one, and that's going to be, I'm going to talk about water background in general. And a little bit, because I imagine most of you probably know a lot about what water and watersheds are, but just in case, I'm going to cover some stuff. And then Laurene is going to take over and talk about our local water delivery system and some of the issues in terms of contamination. Okay, so we're both on the Zone 7 board, and I'm on both the Zone 7 board and the DCA board. So then we will go ahead and go on down. Okay, I believe we're going to go on down. Let's see. There we go. All right, so water conveyance and storage, basically that's going to be what I'm going to be dealing with. And in conveyance, we're talking about things both on the statewide level and on our regional level and our local level. And this is becoming more and more important as we're looking at, of course, the drought and issues of do we have enough water and can we deliver water to various different parts of both local and the state. The one thing I want to really make sure you understand here, and I know most of you do, but is that we are on the same water system as Southern California is in terms of pulling water in from the State Water Project. And so we are kind of like the first straw in that system that comes out of the Delta and then jumps into the aqueducts. Okay, now here's a little bit about the hydrological cycle, just as a review from everything you got in 5th grade. Basically what we've got is, of course, everything is run by solar energy and gravity. And we have things which we've got runoff. And if you've got like areas where if you look in our region, every time you see kind of like the top of a hill, that's part of our watershed. Our whole watershed in this area is about 740 square miles, and Zone 7 covers about 400 plus square miles of that. So ultimately everything goes to the ocean, things evaporate, you get condensation, and the cycle starts again. An important thing to pay attention to is this bit with the aquifer, and an aquifer is just a saturated part of the ground where water kind of fills all the pore spaces. There's very few places in the world where it's like one big basin. It's not an underground lake. I think there's some places in Florida that's like that, and some places in Mexico, but generally speaking, it's just saturated ground. So I showed you this slide because with this slide, this is showing you that we have got one of the most highly engineered water systems in the world. And this is just showing you a little bit about, look at those dates going down from 1913 all the way down to 1960 with the Burns-Porter Act, which kind of laid things out with the way we get our water today. The point of this slide is that it is highly engineered and it is old. So the infrastructure itself is old at this point. So what are some of our main challenges that we face? And we've got a number of challenges and a number of risks. And one of the things that you're going to find the most is you're going to find climate change and unpredictable weather. One speaker I heard, Hunter Lovins, she says she called it climate weirding. And it just, we've got one extreme and the next extreme. And with some of the models that I've seen, I mean, there are lots of different models, but basically the idea is that the far northwest is going to get wetter and wetter. The south and southwest is going to get drier and drier. And we here in the middle are going to be experiencing a little bit of both. So sometimes a lot of wet and probably most of the time a lot of dry. I know that a lot of times we speak of ourselves as being in a drought. I think we have to kind of change our thinking a little bit because we're not in a drought anymore, we're in a new reality. And so we are in a dry climate with occasional bits of wet. So that's just where we are. So we've got increasing population in the state and in around the world, obviously, but especially here in California. Our infrastructure, both the local ones, the regional ones, and the statewide ones, are very old. And then also the delta through which our water comes, the delta is kind of like a conveyance in itself in getting its water to, say, Harvey O. Banks or else to Jones pumping plants. And Jones belongs to the Central Valley Project, which is federal. Harvey O. Banks is what we have, and that is the State Water Project. And that's where we get our water from. But these plants are old and the pumps are old. And we have to start looking at this. Now, in terms of the Delta, how many of you have actually driven on the roads on the Delta? Have you folks done this? Have you noticed, like as you drive on the Delta, some of the roads are kind of slumping off to the sides and there's cracks? Also, have you noticed that as you're there, you might be here on the road and the river is, okay, here's the road. The river is here and the houses and the fields are here. That's subsidence. They are lower than the river. It's pretty shocking. And some of the houses that really planned ahead, they're up on tall stilts. Okay, so other risk factors, we've got changing regulations. You might remember a few years ago when Wanger went ahead and said, you know, you can't pump right now, even though there's water coming down the river, because we've got the Delta smelt in there, and this is a bad time to pump for them. So we have fishery protections, and then we've got changes in water quality. We have the cyanotoxins and the water coming in where we've got, they tell you, don't let your dog drink from Lake Del Valle, or don't let your dog into the water over there in Alameda because they may die, quite frankly. And some of my dog did get into some of the water and then she was sick for like 3 days. Fortunately, she did not die. So, and then of course we have problems of storage. And I know that we like to make sure that we have got some free running rivers and that type of thing, because we need things for the salmon, we need good salmon run, but we also need to store. And there's a couple different ways to store. You can store in reservoirs and you can store in groundwater. Okay, so here we go with some of our risk factors. We can go from having lots and lots of snow to having very little. I was just up in Donner. My daughter swam Lake Donner with her swim group. It was pretty exciting. It's not often you get to cheer on your 35-year-old in sports anymore. But yeah, there was no snow. There was no snow at all around. And so this other picture that you've got over here on the right-hand side shows a little bit of snow. I think this was from 2016, but it's there's really almost nothing up there now. And this is important because this, on the left-hand side, is a reservoir for us normally, whatever the normal is now. And the reservoir is just not there anymore. It's melting off early, it's running off, it's falling down as rain as opposed to snow. That means it's running downhill and running into all the river systems, the Feather River, past Doraville, past Shasta, and it's coming on down the Sacramento River and the San Joaquin, and it's coming into the Delta. And so this is water that would be nice if we could capture some of this, because this is water that normally we would be able to capture it because it would be coming down at a much slower pace. In other words, we would be harvesting that water from April on through August until the new water year starts November 1. We're not. It's not there anymore. So that reservoir is gone for all intents and purposes. And into the future, probably yes. Okay, here I just wanted to show this one because this is like Oroville, which is part of the state water system, and it is one of our main storages. Oops, maybe they can't hear me, but stay here. So it's one of our main storages, and so as you can see on the left-hand side of this, or left-hand side, there it is full, and here it is basically today, as it is today. And I was just up at Shasta on a water thing about a month ago. And Shasta is right down where you can see some of the original structures that they used to build the dam. So it's pretty shocking. And the boat, if you ever get up to the boat ramp there, the boat ramp, we had to walk down to get on this boat that was taking us on a tour of the dam. And it was a bunch of water people. And what happened was that we had to walk way down this ramp. And I looked up, and 140 feet above me was where we normally would have gotten on the boat. Yeah. So you have this huge, what they call a bathtub ring around this thing. And I just put this up. This is available to anybody who wants to pull this up. They update it almost daily. And I pulled this up. This was from yesterday, as you can see, midnight, September 10th. And these are the levels of the dams. The ones that most interest us would be Oroville and then also San Luis Reservoir. So you can see they're quite a bit below their historic averages. Okay, so levee failure. This was 2004. This was in the San Francisco Chronicle. And this is one of the things which is a potential problem with either flooding. And we do, I don't know if you guys saw in the news, like last 2 weeks ago, they started to say, we might just have a mega flood. And so this is the type of thing where you're going to have it go through levee systems. Subsidence, obviously, the land is going to be coming down, and it is down in some places more than 30 feet from the levels that it used to be. And the reason is it's peat, and peat basically collapses. And then we have sea level rise, which we're already seeing effects of, and then seismic risks, because some of these levees really, they're dirt filled. If you read a history of, I was just reading this history of the, the Delta, and what you sometimes see in there is that farmers were kind of saying, oh, well, you got a levee, watch my levee, it's bigger than your levee. I mean, it's kind of like this little thing where they were building these levees just to try and make sure they had the water and they could pump over. So seismic risk is a very real type of thing in terms of earthquakes. So all of this goes into the levees, which means the integrity of the delta is at risk altogether. Okay, so here's another thing, annual precipitation. This is kind of an older map, but it still shows the same picture, is that our annual precipitations, we get about 75% of our water falling in the north, and 75% or even more of our population is in the south. So the red dots are like population centers, and you can see the bluish and the purplish are where we get the most precipitation. Red is where you get the least. It's hotter, drier. Okay, so we come up with a water portfolio. I mean, as you may be aware, we first had Delta Fix, which Jerry Brown said we had this Delta Fix. We're going to put 2 tunnels through the delta, and we're gonna build this thing, and then here's how we're going to manage the delta. And then Newsom came along and said, nope, we're not doing it that way. We're going to do a single tunnel, and we're going to have a water portfolio. And a water portfolio means that you look at a lot of different types of things. And when you're dealing with a water portfolio, one of the things which, thank goodness, because I'm on many committees in the state for various different projects, for like, disabled, not disabled, but diverse communities and disadvantaged communities and SB 200. But we can see we're going to keep this regional and then basically try to maintain and diversify our water supplies. And that's the thing, we have to diversify them. We have to have many, many, many different options. And that's hard for people to see sometimes. And then we have to protect and enhance natural ecosystems while we're at it, if we at all can. Some things are going to suffer because guess what? It doesn't matter what we do. We will never get the delta back to where it was 100 years ago. It ain't gonna happen, no matter what we do. And then we have to build connections between different systems, interties, so that as one system, if we have an earthquake and one system fails, we can still get water to people, because this is all about, it's about ecosystems, and it's also about public health and safety. And so, and then we have to look ahead and be prepared. We cannot, this is kind of a tough one for, somebody like me who's an elected official at this point, but we can't look to the next political thing. Sometimes we'll say and do things that people don't like, and we have to, we have to see what is the appropriate thing to do. We can't do things to cover an election cycle. We got to be looking 50, 100 years down the road. Otherwise, none of this is going to work. 50 years goes in a flash. It's amazing how fast that goes. So here we go. I'm going to talk a lot about delta conveyance, because that's near and dear to my heart. I'm president of the board for this, and it is a water infrastructure upgrade. Now, what the DCA has done is we are for looking at the design and the engineering to see what's possible. We spent a great deal of time with the Stakeholders Engagement Committee, which I chaired. It was with, at least 20 different people from the Delta, representing tribal units, representing historical places, representing ecosystems, representing recreation, parks, and different cities. So basically, we heard these people were not in favor of the project, as you can imagine, coming into the Delta. But I admire them so much, because what they did is they really listened to the design things that we were doing and said, no, you can't do there. We've got the storks over there, and that's not going to work. So we actually moved some of our systems. No, you can't do that because there's a school down the road. You're going to have trucks coming back and forth. A kid's going to get killed. So we moved it. And so, there were a lot of things that went on, and that's another whole talk, and I won't get into it. But it suffice it to say that a lot of the things that we did as the DCA in terms of stakeholder engagement, the Department of Water Resources, who really they're the ones who are going to be in charge of making the decisions of how this is going to work and in charge of the regulations. They have listened, and they have incorporated some of that into some of their stakeholder engagement as well. So why would we do it? Why would we do it? I kind of took a couple slides and amalgamated them together. Well, basically, number one, it modernizes our infrastructure, which is crucial at this point. It gives the Department of Water Resources the flexibility to divert water when needed, to not divert water when it's not needed. I know there were some issues that people said, well, there's sometimes where it's just not going to have any water in it. Yes, that's true. If we do not have the water coming down the river where we have enough to divert it, where if we did divert it, it would create problems with ecosystems and problems with farming, then it won't be diverted. But guess what? We have got flashy floods. We've got atmospheric rivers. We have very, very wet years. And so sometimes it's a really good thing to divert some of this water and make sure that it gets into storage places so that it can be held for the future. So basically, it will be consistent with all regulatory requirements in terms of water rights. And it will be running when water is available for it. I know that people say, this is such an expensive system. Oh, yes, it is. $1 billion here, $1 billion there. We're pretty soon talking real money. And but with this system, it does make it so that some of the water will be able to be moved and stored when we have this early runoff, when we have this flashy flood, when we have the atmospheric rivers. So this is crucially important to be able to give Department of Water Resources the flexibility to work with this. It will be addressing sea level rise because the intakes are 40 miles upstream. It will be minimizing water supply disruption due to seismic risk because it will not absolutely rely on making sure that all those delta levees stay intact. And then also it will protect water supply reliability. It'll get the intakes away from the main thing where we've got the San Joaquin and the Sacramento coming in, and that's where you get a lot of the delta smelt, because I love that kind of semi-brackish water. And we will be away from those areas. And so, and the way that the intakes have been designed is they minimize take of fish. They're running along the side of the design is running alongside the river. And also we minimize the footprint significantly by the design of the intake. And then it will also, again, provide operational flexibility. So we'll be able to watch after aquatic conditions in the Delta, and also be able to make sure that, that we can deliver water. Okay, so here it is. This is we looked at 3 different options. Okay, the one that was closest to the original plans of the twin tunnels and that type of a thing is that central option that comes down the black one. Then we were looking at that and listening to what folks were saying about how it disrupted communities and ecosystems, and then decided that really logistically, it was better to take a more of an eastern approach. So the eastern approach kind of runs very close to I-5. And so that means that as you would truck in, people and all that kind of thing, it's a lot less disruptive to communities and a lot less disruptive to ecosystems as well. And then, so that one went over here. And the one thing that you notice, you say, both of the central and the eastern ones were coming in to something that we would build called the South Complex, basically the South Delta Outlet Complex. And this was a new reservoir, basically right next to Clifton Court. And that was so that the water wouldn't mix. And so you wouldn't have the fish getting entrapped into this system, because they do get entrapped in Clifton Court Forebay. And so that was that idea. Then engineers came up with another idea. They said, why? Because we also heard from Discovery Bay, and they said, what? We don't want you building that thing there. That's going to be so disruptive to us. And so we said, okay, well, let's look at something else. And so we looked at this system, basically called the Bethany alternate. And this is the one that in the CEQA analysis seems to be the favorite one. It has been my favorite from the beginning. They always said, oh, we're not allowed to tell them what your favorite is. I said, okay, then I'm speaking as an individual. I think we're really stupid if we don't go with the Bethany alternative. But that was, that was my opinion. But it turns out that that is the preferred route at this point. I mean, things could change, because we have to go through the CEQA analysis, the California Environmental Quality Act analysis. And that takes us down past. What's really nice about this one is that if this is the one that goes through, it will not be using either of the very old and at some point needing to be upgraded pumping plants, neither Harvey Bags nor Jones. And what it would do is get into a pumping system, a retrieval shaft and pumping system to pump over into Bethany Reservoir. Now this is again a little tricky, because there is a wildlife refuge that goes along the one side of Bethany Reservoir, so we would tunnel underneath it and then come out, okay, so that we don't disrupt the wildlife refuge. Okay, so that's part of the mitigation there. The beauty of that then comes into, as we start to look at other things like the Los Vaqueros Reservoir expansion project and the intertide there, we have a lot more intertide with a lot of our new systems. So basically from there, it would then be pumped into South Bay Aqueduct, which we already have our stuff pumped into South Bay Aqueduct, and then we would get our water here. So this takes into, it's not a source of more water than anybody would get. It's not a source of, everybody's always talking about the not new water. This is not new water, okay? This is not more water to Southern California than they already have a right to get. It would be basically just making it so that it's a little more reliable, and we can pump water when we have the water and not have it just run past us because it's at the wrong time of year. So it does take climate change into account, and it is a very robust system. It's pretty amazing. The folks that we've had working on this have been folks like have worked on the Channel and have worked on things that go, you know, underneath the Bosphorus and underneath the Thames, and so these are tunnel people. They know what they're doing. But again, we're not the decision makers on this. Department of Water Resources is, okay? So what is it? Okay, it is a single tunnel. It is not a tunnel. It is not a double tunnel. It's a single tunnel. It delivers water to basically to State Water Project customers, and Zone 7 is State Water Project customers. And then it delivers water in times of excess, and it helps provide water delivery flexibility. It is not just a Southern California water grab, although yes, they're really quite excited about being able to get water when otherwise they wouldn't. I will not tell you otherwise. It is not a change in the water rights. In other words, it has to be regulated within the current water rights. And I had people say, oh, well, if you run this thing, it's going to drain the Sacramento River. No, it is not going to drain the Sacramento River. The Sacramento River will get the water it's supposed to get. Also remember, we have ocean-going vessels that go up to Port Stockton. We can't drain the Sacramento River. Those vessels will not be able to get that to port. So at any rate, so that's just some of the issues about that one. Here is a link if you get onto www.deltaconveyanceproject.com. This is through Department of Water Resources, and you can get hold of it. It's a very long CEQA analysis, but you can also get into some of the executive summaries and how to say look at the impact report, which is a little bit shorter. So the final decision will be with the Department of Water Resources, and it will not be made until the end of the CEQA process and listening to the EIR, which I believe is at the end of this year. So another project, which actually this ties into Los Vaqueros. You all know where Los Vaqueros is, right? Okay, they're doing an expansion project, And what they're doing is it will increase water supply reliability. Zone 7 has put in for about 10,000 acre feet of water through this expansion project. So we are with that particular thing. Angela Ramirez Holmes, one of our board members, is actually president of the board for this. And basically it will give a more emergency water supply, especially if we were to have, some seismic problems. Basically, East Bay, Zone 7, Contra Costa, we all could basically benefit from this, mainly through the interties. Is where Zone 7 mainly will be benefiting through the interties between Bethany and this and with other agencies as well. The quality of the water delivered to municipal and industrial water treatment facilities will be a bit better because this is you can kind of consider it a local storage system because it's just up the hill. I'm sure you've all driven that horrendous, hellish type of drive on going over Vasco Road, but yeah, it's near there. Okay, so here it is. There's the expansion. It's going to expand the reservoir from 160 to 225,000 acre feet. Now, what's an acre foot? Acre foot, a football field. Take a football field, fill it up with about a foot of water. That's an acre foot. That would give, it used to be, you'd say 3, and probably the way we're going to be doing regulatory issues, it'll probably be 3 households again, but they say 2 households now. It's really about 2 and a bit. It provides it for the year, enough water for the year. Okay, it will have a conveyance, which is really quite good, running to Bethany Reservoir, a lift pump station, and then has trails and marina and interpretive center, that type of a thing. And this is all through Contra Costa Water. Okay, then there's another one, Sites Reservoir. Now, if you go up to Sacramento and then you go a bit west-northwest, you're running to Maxwell, which is the town near where this is. Interesting thing about this, the people of Maxwell really like this project. Most of them do. Because this will provide, the town is kind of like one of those Western towns that's kind of like failing a little bit. And this will give them, some impetus. And they would, and the people who own the property, and there's one woman who was like a major landholder from this area, and she was very happy to see this happen. And so, and the Sites Reservoir from its original conception has been minimized somewhat. But it will improve our water quality in the area. Zone 7 is putting again for about 10,000 acre feet that we would be able to have regulatory or banking with it. What it really does is it gives us new water, really, because it gives us an off-stream reservoir. It can gather water from the coastal ranges as they come down into it. And it's something where we could release things from Sites Reservoir at times when you might want to retain some of the water in Oroville or Shasta in order to keep a cold pool for the fish.
I got to Foster City on Wednesdays now, but I'll be back later.
So it would increase Northern California's water storage capacity by about 15%.
There's leftover Chinese food, there's rice and chicken.
If it had been stored
that would be pretty
year
good.
2021, I don't have 2022, but it would have been over 1 million acre feet and it would have served about 1.5 million families and farms. So you can see, we've got water for both farms and for municipal and industrial use as well. Okay, now Zone 7. We store water outside of our valley. We store it in groundwater. This is just a little thing I pulled up just to show you that groundwater can have different levels which can be separated from one another. In other words, it's not just one big bath. And if we look here, even in our own valley, we've got different aquifers at different levels separated by what some people call an aquitard. And that means that it's like clay layers, and that where the water doesn't really seep through from one level to the next. And so we have stored this down in Kern County and in Coelho and semi-tropic, and then also San Luis Reservoir. And the one thing I wanted to put this up because I just wanted to show you. San Luis Reservoir, full. See that island right there? That's this right here. That's what it looks like right now. Okay. So do we have to get water to store? Yes, we do. Or we are in deep. Okay, so here we go. Then we move into the Livermore Valley. Basically, we feed our stuff here. We get 70% of our water from the South Bay Aqueduct. And then you can see we've got the Dublin, Pleasanton, Livermore, Cal Water, and those are our retailers. So every time there's a wholesaler, we make sure that our retailers can sell direct to the agricultural folks here in the valley. And they get a wholesale rate. So also we've got Lake Del Valle. Lake Del Valle is owned by Department of Water Resources, so they maintain and regulate that. And then we can get water from that. And then we also have in our own groundwater, we can store about 250,000 acre feet. We don't use all of it, just keep a certain baseline going there. And then Chain of Lakes, which is developing. We own 2 of the Chain of Lakes now. And I'll just a really quick one, and this will be one of my last slides. And that basically you can see that we've analyzed the Chain of Lakes. We're not going to get them for like 2035 or something. We were supposed to get them in 2014. And then the miners of gravel decided they wanted to go deeper, and Alameda County, in their great wisdom, said, "Oh, sure, go right ahead." Yeah. Anyway, so as you can see, Lake I, which we own, and Cope Lake, which we own. Cope Lake is great for stormwater management. Almost all of them are good for stormwater management. Well, at least basically some conveyance. Lake I is good, Lake I, and hopefully when we get D, will be good for groundwater recharge. Others aren't, because if there's too much silt or too much clay, the water just won't percolate down in from that lake. So it's just basically a conveyance at that point. Any rate, so how do we get reliable water? Well, we can't do it with just one thing. We can't do it just a delta, with just desal, with just basically potable reuse. We can't do it. All of these things are wonderful. And guess what? We're probably going to have to do them all. And I know you're looking at me and you're going, oh, how are we going to afford this? I don't know. We're going to have to, though, because we have got, if we don't have water, it's worse than not having trouble paying for stuff. So we're going to have to pay for some of this stuff. We're going to have to pay for purification. We're going to have to pay for delivery systems. We're going to have to pay for multiple systems, because there is no silver bullet. Okay, we're going to have to worry about a silver Swiss Army knife with all the attachments, because that's really and truly the only way we're going to get through the next 50 years. So from that, and conservation, of course, plays a big role. Guys, keep it up. And from that, I just want to do a thanks to, these are folks that I've either worked with or they've given me some information. So that's been really, really quite good. And any questions?
We do have one in the chat.
Okay. Can I pull the chat up?
Yeah, or I can ask, hopefully you can hear, would the Delta Conveyance Project provide water that would be available for customers of Zone 7? I think you did.
Absolutely, yes, because we are on that system, and it would be coming right through South Bay Aqueduct, and we get over 70% of our water through the South Bay Aqueduct.
And I have a few questions I wanted to ask. In August, Governor Newsom released his water supply strategy, which has 4 actions that are outlined, including developing new water supplies, expanding storage, which you talked about, promote conservation, improving forecasting, and modernization of infrastructure and water rights. What do you think of that strategy, and how does that interplay with some of these projects that you've already talked about during the work?
It's a lot of interaction with a lot of these projects in terms of that strategy. One of the things which I personally really like about this is he's hoping to, and I don't know how he's going to do this, but he's hoping to streamline some of the permitting things. Whereas if you have some projects which have the same exact requirements and they're basically the same project, can you kind of roll them in together and get them permitted? That would be a really neat thing to be able to do. In terms of, and of course, I really believe in upgrading our conveyance systems. And I think we need to basically look at Harvey O. Banks and say, we have to also work on Harvey O. Banks. We also have to work on, in some cases, there's a desal plant that's being planned to go in near Antioch, and we're going to have that. That is a problem. It's very expensive to run those things, and it's problematic in terms of where do you put the effluent when you're done with it. So some folks say, hey, let's just shove it out to sea and put it in a deep trench. there's ecosystems there too. So there's none. There is every good invention, you know, paves the road to other places.
That was going to be one of my questions too about desalination. So that kind of answers that. Finally, unless anyone else has any questions, okay, go.
I'd like to ask you if you can do something about the operator loss. I see sprinkler systems during the heat of the day, and which is, I think, dumb. And the other thing is in reservoirs, if you can put stearic acid on the lake, that's supposed to cut down tremendously on evaporation.
Yeah, remember these lakes are also ecosystems. And, you know, so you have to be careful how you're going to manage that type of a thing. There is always going to be evapotranspiration going on. One of the things that I think is the beauty of the tunnel, as opposed to putting in a peripheral canal, which this is not the peripheral canal of the 80s. It is not. That thing would have taken a 6-lane highway across, cut through everything, and been tremendous in evaporation. A tunnel is not cutting underneath. The main impact is going to be footprints of where you built the maintenance shafts and that type of thing. But it's a lot less impact in terms of that. It's also less impact in terms of transpiration and evaporation. There's some of this at this point in time we can't avoid, unfortunately. It's a real drawback in terms of, because we lose what we call carriage costs of all of this type of thing. We lose a lot of water through evaporation.
Especially sprinkler systems.
Oh, sprinkler systems, that's something you can manage. I mean, you can, I walked past a lot of things. It depends. In some cases, middle of the day sprinkling is not a good idea. And many crops can be done with either micro sprinklers or with drip systems and that type of thing. So basically, farmers need to. It's expensive to do though, and that's the trouble. It's very expensive, and I do not have any idea how some of the farmers are going to manage some of it, to be honest with you. Because if you do overhead irrigation during the day, you're going to get your maximum evaporation. So timing is crucial.
Speaking of farming, a question came up in the chat. What is the current percentage of use statewide of agricultural use versus other use, residential, commercial?
I don't have that. Do you have that in your head? I don't have that in my head. I just don't. Okay.
Yeah, well, that's because that's a stupid question.
Yes.
Sarah, long time no see. How you doing?
Going down from the Central Valley, I've seen too much of that. And I know that in Israel, they've been doing
and there's Mary.
For decades.
Yeah, it's another whole infrastructure. And I think some of our farmers are just going to have to, because it's projected that we'll have, over 1 million acres going fallow because of lack of water. And that impacts, you might say, oh, yeah, but that also impacts our economy. It impacts their food production. It impacts the communities living there. It impacts the workers. Again, we'll probably have to have some of them go out. We will. And so some of the farmers are going to have to be reevaluating what they're doing.
Right.
Okay. We're going to have to short on time, so
Laurene has to be able to get in too.
Yeah, we'll have Laurene start.
Yeah, and maybe if we have questions, we can both kind of bounce off of each other a little bit. Okay. All right. So I'm going to continue here. Laurene, all you have to do, let me get back onto this for some reason. There we go. Okay. All you have to do is press the down button or this button right here. That one or that one.
I'm not a teacher, so my projection is going to be limited, but I will try to get to the back of the room. So Sarah's basically giving you the big picture. I'm going to try and zoom in a little bit into what we do here in Tri-Valley and Zone 7. So he kind of mentioned where our water comes from, but when it comes into zone 7, we have some storage places. We also have some treatment plants. And our main storage place is the aquifer below, aquifer basin. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of these treatment plants. So we have surface water and groundwater treatment plants. The surface water treatment plants, and this is water that comes from the State Water Project. There's Patterson Pass and there's Yellow Valve. There's some standard treatment that goes on, but recently we've opened up these extra part of the plant, which actually gives ozonation, which is something I'll describe a little bit on another slide, but is a very good treatment for some of the stuff that's been coming our way lately. Groundwater treatment, we have the Mojo demineralization plant, which is, as we're talking about reverse osmosis, that's what takes place there. And then we have 2 possible new plants that we're talking about. You may be, I'll drill down on this a little bit. You may be familiar with some of the PFAS issues we have. I'll describe those to those of you that aren't familiar with it. But we have some contamination that we're trying to address. And so we're discussing building some possible plants for that. Okay, so at the Mojo plant, we apply reverse osmosis, and then we blend. So when you use reverse osmosis, it cleans the water quite well. It's me, I liken it to like distilled water, kind of dead water, just not much mineral in there. So we don't use reverse osmosis for all of it. We do blend it with some water that hasn't had reverse osmosis applied to it. But with this blending, we're able to get well below the levels that we have to when it comes to contaminants. And it keeps your minerals. Your body expects a certain amount of minerals when you drink water. And if you don't get those minerals, it can kind of screw your internal chemistry. So it's best to have something that has some of the salty stuff in it. And then there's a little bit of chloramines that we add. It's not a lot. It's just a little bit, and it just kind of keeps it disinfected throughout the line until it gets to the end of the line. So at the ozonation plants, we sometimes use chlorine, but really right now we're using ozone. And then we apply a little bit of ammonia to it, which creates chloramine. And again, you've got a little bit of that. It's not a lot. And that helps protect as it goes down the line. Oh, sorry. So I'm trying to show you here how ozone works. So basically, you take oxygen and zap it, and it creates this an O3 molecule. So typically you have 2 oxygens per molecule. It gives you 3 oxygens. And this tends to seek out some of the things that we don't like and destroys it. And what's really nice is then it takes it down to some of its basic parts. So you don't have a lot of waste that you have to do. And these are some of the things that it attacks are bacteria, viruses, some of the algal byproducts like Sarah was talking about. And some chemicals, not all chemicals, but there are some important chemicals that it attacks. So after the treatments, it goes into our system. You can see the transmission system here. That's the surface water. See the Mojo wells there? That's where the treatment plant is for the groundwater. Plus we have some other wells, and those go into the system here. So one of the first things I asked when I came to Zone 7 is, I'd really like to know where drop of water starts and how it works its way to my tap. And everybody laughed at me, quite appropriately so. It's really hard to track water here because there's so many things going on at so many different times. You have groundwater, you have surface water, they come in at different times for reasons. You have some wells that are turned off, you have a plant that's turned off for cleaning or maintenance. And so you continually have stuff coming in and out of the system. So it's really hard to say where your water comes from. You just know it comes from the system and these particular components of it. So we have the Chain Lake wells there, we have the Stone Ridge well. See that little cluster there is Mocha wells, and then you've got the Hot Bear wells there. This is just zone 7. That would be good, yes, thank you. Thank you. So there's a certain amount of testing that we have to do to understand what's in the water. And then we test for this a variety of things, microbes, organics, inorganics, nutrients. There's a lead and copper rule that comes from Gregory, and PFAS, which again I'll drill down on a little bit more. That's actually an umbrella term for a group of chemicals that we have concerns over. And the standards that we apply for the testing, so the primary testing standards have to do with health and safety that come from the state mostly. Secondary, which I think comes from PWR, is taste and smell.
DDW, the Department of Drinking Water.
DDW. So these don't really affect your health and safety, but it affects your enjoyment of the water. So we do test for those things as well. So this is the annual, I kind of grabbed a few things from our annual consumer confidence report. So you can see a lot of the testing that we do. This is a bunch of stuff we tested for that we don't have. This is stuff that we test for and make sure it's below levels that are acceptable. Here's some lead and copper testing, some PFAS stuff. So if you go to, once a year you get this report. I think you're getting to notice it now, so you can go online. But typically this is something once a year that we're required to do. Your retailers are required to do their own as well. And so if you want to know about your water quality and testing you do on that, go to this report.
You'll be quizzed on it later.
So I'm just trying to remind people about various sources of water contamination that we're having to deal with. There's a whole variety, and we may not have all of these in our area, but we have a lot of them. And so you see how these are. We do have an upper and lower aquifer, more or less, in our area. I'm oversimplifying it. And east to west, you also have the, you can kind of divide them a little bit beyond their characteristics. But generally, our water flows from east to west. And generally, although we do have confining layers of clay, they are not perfect. And there is some communication between layers at certain points. So it can communicate within itself. May take a while, but that matters. So you can have things like, see the low density leaky underground fuel tank. You guys may remember a couple of decades ago, it was a big effort to clean a lot of gas stations. It's still ongoing, but I think the regulations require a little old now. But that's something that we have to look for. Septic tanks, a lot of nitrogen in the water, or nitrates in the water. Sewers, you can have leaks and stuff from there. You have landfills. Old landfills are not lined, and so you can have leaks from landfills. We don't do road salt here. We've been placed with a lot of snow. I think we have a road salt issue. Yeah, waste ponds, depending on what kind of waste you're talking about. If you're in the oil industry, there's certain waste that you'll get there. We also have the sewer treatment does have a certain amount of waste that is put out also. So that's something that might apply there. And then mining sites, I don't think that's an issue right in our area, but I think on the periphery we've had some mining.
Recycling.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Oh, I guess I'll look here. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to drill down on the PFAS. So PFAS is an abbreviation for polyfluorinated alkyl substances. I can never say it. It doesn't roll off the tongue. But there are a lot of them that exist now. I was going to say 1,500.
Yeah, at latest count.
I was going to say I saw 20, but okay.
It could be. It could be.
I think the EPA is going to, they cut off at some point to give the number. We have about a half a dozen or so in our area that we're concerned. And so if you take a look at this tree, See the PFOA and PFOS? Those are the main ones that have been around for a part of the century. Maybe not in our area, but in existence. And at some point, they realized that these were kind of problematic. And so they created some other products that are supposed to be less harmful. So basically, what these are a chain of carbon and fluorine bonds. And it has a really interesting molecules on the end. I'm on the edge of my chemical understanding. But what the heads of tails do is that they repel water and they repel grease or oil, which is why these are such cool products. So when you see PFOA, think of Teflon. You know, nothing sticks on your hand, right? PFOS, think of Scotch Guard. You spray it on something and water and grease are repelled. They're really cool products. They do all sorts of cool things, but unfortunately, not good to drink. So since we're finding it in our ground where we're having to deal with them. And so these were like a chain of 8, I believe. So see like the Gen X and the Adona and the PFPS. Those are supposed to be less harmful because they're shorter chains. They have their own problems too, but wait and see what the studies have to say with regards to those. So,
that's okay.
So there's a fast follower. You see the PFHXS. So the PFOA and PFOS, they've been around for a while. They've been tracking really slowly through regulation. But we kind of see what's going on. The states have picked it up. The EPA has been slow. Now we see PFHXS coming in, and it's tracking fast, but it's tracking like these other two. And so we're looking to have to deal with that reason. We do have some bad in some of our wells. So yeah, so these are the sources of PFAS. Firefighting foam is probably one of the bigger ones that's a problem for us. It gets on the ground and works its way into groundwater. We're just looking right now to understand the sources, but we're getting hints that this one might be a big player. You've got in all sorts of other things. I think the part that people are surprised you see it's in personal care products like shampoo. I'm going to give a shout out to our Congresswoman, Becca Bauer-Cahan. She is an environmental lawyer, and she's been running a lot of legislation to get this out of our products, which is, I think, pretty cool. But there's still a lot of work to be done. And yeah, I was going to say, I'm just looking at the rich products, see if there's anything else to pronounce. But anyway, you can see what we're, I'll give you an example of a personal care product that stresses me. And that is floss. That has stuff like that on it. So they're going to have to find something else so it makes it smooth and slick. When you open up a wrapper of like a Hershey bar, you notice that the bar doesn't melt onto the wrapper. That's got a lining of PFAS. So we have it in a lot of places around us. Drinking it specifically to ingest it by drinking it is our concern. We're trying to retrieve the benefit now. So you got various treatment options. So GAC, granular activated carbon, you guys may know it as a Brita filter. I'm not promoting Brita, so most people are familiar with that particular brand. So ion exchange is sort of more like a designer tablets that kind of help to attract things. So it's something that you can design for very specific contaminants that you want. It's helpful for chromium. And then there's a reverse osmosis where you clean everything up. It is expensive and energy intensive. I'm going to show you real quick. So this is kind of what your GAC or granular activated carbon. The reason this stuff is so good is that not only is it the volume to surface area is small, because you've got the still small pieces. Within it, there's also microporosity within it. So the way this works is that the contaminants soar onto the surface. If you've got a lot of surface throughout this mixture, you have more chance of absorbing the material that you're trying to get rid of. So it's been around a long time. It's really handy, and it still is really important for what we're doing. So disposal options. This is not destruction. This is disposal. Right now, the two that are given to us are landfill or deep well injection. Not really good. You're kicking the can down the road. Right? You're leaving it for the next generation to figure out. But it's what's available to us right now. And So yeah, deep well injection is probably more oil industry interest. We don't do deep well injection. It's not available to us as an asking. Landfills you're familiar with, but as contaminants get regulated more, the cost of putting in a landfill is going to go up. If they discover and decide this is very hazardous, you don't have to put in a particular landfill that's meant to handle very hazardous materials. And so, again, but you're kicking the can down the road. Okay. So here are the destruction options. Basically, you can't partially destroy it. You let it disintegrate partially, and those are really bad parts. Also, those create problems for you. You got to destroy it entirely, take it down to its basic elements. And thermal treatment's the only thing proven right now to do that. It's energy intensive. There's some people that use thermal treatment, they don't get it high enough, and so the neighborhood is getting these parts, right? Not good. So, yeah, this is expensive and has its own problems. There are some new technologies people are working on. So maybe I'll get to the next one. All right, this is hot off the press. This is just like a week or so ago. Northwestern University, some students were told to graduate students, of course. They were told, I don't think this is going to work, but give this a try doing something relatively simple procedure. I know, okay, we'll go do this. And it seemed to kind of work, and then COVID. So only recently they got back in the lab to tell us about it. So there's a little bit of a delay there. But it turns out, and this was for a particular PFAS. So you may have to design it for different PFASs. But it turns out these particular substances, which are pretty easy to change, help destroy this. And it's funny because it's forever chemicals, it's really tough to destroy. Sunlight doesn't seem to destroy nothing. But remember I told you about the heads on the end? For some reason, this attacks those. And once you've disabled those, it unzips. Again, I'm on the edge of my chemical knowledge. So you'd have to have a chemist explain that more to you.
Carboxyl groups. It's a carboxyl group. Some of the enzymes, a lot of PFAS have carboxyl groups.
So that's what they're hitting. So early days, just hot off the press. I'm waiting for somebody else to repeat this. But this is really promising because it's probably not something you can do in situ, like in a well. You couldn't do it in place. But once you've got the stuff through treatment, you still got to do something with it. And this may be better than just disposing it and forgetting about it. So this is really hopeful. We were happy to see this. So fingers crossed that progresses. Okay. So I just want to leave you with one thought. And that was, so this is our groundwater basin. You've got
yeah, 180, so Livermore, Pleasant.
Yeah, so this is our tri-valley. This is our basin. This is where we get our water from. We all get our water from this. Not just Zone 7, Pleasant has wells. You've got a lot of private wells. Calwater has some wells. And so, any contamination in there, PFAS or otherwise, it's something we all need to clean up. And so think about it before you add anything, or throw anything out back. Think about it because we all, this is all ours. And we need to keep it clean and work together to keep it clean. Sometimes I think people think, well, it's just us in this city. It's not. We're all in this together. And so I just want to remind people of that.
Anyone have questions? Karen, do you monitor the capacity of the aquifer in the valley? So perhaps a couple of years ago, I heard the rumor that people were buying land just of water to sell during the drought. So pumping water, from our aquifer, is the Zone 7 actually monitor?
Go ahead. You want me to answer this?
Yeah, she's got more history here.
Okay. Okay. Basically, what's happened 2 years ago is, sorry to say, we had to have more determination of what our groundwater areas were like. And so throughout the state, there are various different regions which were required to be putting in applications to become groundwater sustainability agencies. And it turns out Zone 7 is one. We are a groundwater sustainability agency. We were one of the first 13 to get approved. as a groundwater sustainability agency. That means that when somebody goes in to take out water, to put in water, they have to clear it with us, because we are in charge of the groundwater under what's called the the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA. And not all regions have yet gotten state approval for this, and the state, they're trying to keep it so that it's determined locally, but there are some which really haven't come through yet. We have amazing staff, and our staff has been full of techno meetings, and basically they've been gathering data on the groundwater, the state of groundwater, and what's in the groundwater, and putting piezoelectric probes down into the wells to figure out where the aquifers are and everything else. And really, to look at some of these data is really quite interesting, and also cooperating with folks in the lab who have been age dating different parts of the aquifer, that type of thing. So we have reams of data, and we just hit DWR with it, and we got approved under an alternate plan because we didn't have to go through all of the other steps. So basically, we have to monitor what's going on with pulling out or putting in terms of that, and it's a question of can we keep on top of everybody. But somebody like Arrowhead Water couldn't come in and say drill a big well and start pulling water out. They can't do that. Yeah, there are. And I would have to find out how we monitor that, because we're not like the well police per se. We can look at the levels of groundwater. We've got many monitoring wells around the region. It's kind of interesting because if you open up a monitoring well, you'll see a thing that's this big, and you open it, it's got like 3 different pipes in it, each about 3 inches across, and they are monitoring from various different aquifers and points in the aquifers. And so that's the kind of thing that we try to keep track of, where the levels are. If somebody were pulling out an egregious amount of stuff, we would start to see, cones of depression and that type of thing. So actually, it's I will talk to some of our people and see how do we actually make sure that folks aren't pulling more than their share of the groundwater, because for example, the wineries don't use their groundwater to water their vines. They use the surface water that they have been provided from the South Aqueduct. And so what they do is we've got a couple of the wineries which they pull out the stuff from the South Aqueduct, and then they wheel it out to other ranchers and other vineyards, and they kind of agreements with it. They're like their own little water agencies, but they have to do it with the water they can audit. So so that type of thing. I'll have to check and see if we found any issues of somebody who's doing it incorrectly in terms of pulling out more water than you should.
You do permit wells.
Yes, we do permit wells.
You have to come and explain what.
And there are guidelines in terms of how much and what rate they're supposed to be pulling.
So here's a question from the chat that I'll ask quickly. Pleasanton gets about 80% of its water from Zone 7. A Pleasanton city official stated that Zone 7 is capable of supplying Pleasanton's last 20% if Pleasanton's wells were to be shut down as an alternative to doing PFAS treatment and well rehab. Would this be true at all times of the year under current conditions? How would Pleasanton's water supply be at future risk if this alternative were to be employed?
Okay, so I watched the Tuesday meeting. It was really interesting. And that's a comprehensive discussion. So remember I mentioned the fast follower, the PFHXS? Some guidance on that's about to come down, and wells are going to see that. So it sounds to me, if I understand their situation, they kind of have to turn those off until they figure out what to do anymore. So they have already asked us. I don't know if you responded. Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
we do have to provide them with but we'll sell it to them, and that would make their water more expensive.
Yeah, so I think they've already officially asked us.
Yep.
Officially responded, but yeah, pretty much we're going to have to give them one. So we are the water suppliers for the area. So yeah, until they figure out what they're going to do with their wells and the plume in their area. Yeah. Okay.
I'm not married, but we'll pay you. You could ask me. Okay.
Well, I don't know if this is within your purview, but I'm interested in PFAS, and I've never seen a movie about a major lawsuit to for some
Dark Waters.
Yeah, Dark Waters.
Yeah, Dark Waters. And it seems to me that there are probably a couple of manufacturers PFAS, and their cleanup seems to be terribly expensive. Is there any chance there could be a similar lawsuit to pick up the cost of cleanup or this helping the planet?
There are lots of lawsuits right now, and let me say something real quick about that particular movie. It's a good movie to give you the history and the background. I don't think Hollywood had to do too much to that story. But remember that the levels that they're talking, contamination they're talking about in that movie, ours are several orders of magnitude lower. Okay, just keep that in mind. We're not quite in the situation. An order of magnitude is at zero.
We're like 2 or 3 zeros less than there. You know, a better one than Dark Waters. There's a documentary called The Devil We Know, and that follows. Yeah, it's on YouTube, and it follows a lot of the things you got in Dark Waters. So it's almost good to see it as a pair, but it's much more factual and straightforward. I recommend it because it's, believe it or not, even as a documentary, it's completely engrossing.
Right now, I'll tell you, I'm concentrating on talking to other elected officials to see if there was money from things like PFAS is something that has been earmarked. Money for PFAS has been earmarked in the infrastructure bill that just came out. That's what you're talking about is something that's going in the background for a long time. It doesn't give you immediate relief. I'm looking more for something that can give something more immediate. So I'm looking at other things. And you know, anyway, so that's more my push right now. See if Sacramento DC can do for us with regards to that.
Yeah, I have 2 quick questions about the infrastructure plan that you raised. And what it will you talked about.
Oh, are you talking to me?
Yeah, this is for you. So how does the road distribution
That's a potential, but it's not what we're really dealing with at this point. We're really just dealing at this point, the Delta Conveyance folks are just dealing with how to get the plants built. And then whether solar comes into this will come into the final plans in terms of how much renewable can be used, because certainly it would help a lot on the costs of the operation and maintenance.
Then I have a question which you kind of just led into. This sounds like wonderful conversations you're having, but when I was looking into these, I heard time frames from anywhere between 20 to 50 years. When would you perceive this begin to be implemented?
Okay, one of the real issues is we've got to get through the secret process first off. And then we have to start in terms of permitting. And that's why I'm truly hoping that some of Newsom's ideas for being able to, because California is noted for having truly draconian methods of getting permitted. And so we're really hoping that what he's put into this new plan that came out about a week and a half ago, that it will be, that there will be some streamlined permitting, because that could cut 5 years off. So we're still talking about at least about 10 years out before we even start to put shovel to the ground, which is unfortunate because we need water now. Oh no, the reservoir in terms of sites are they're going to actually be putting shovel to ground, I think, in 5 years. Yeah, they do. And then Los Vaqueros, they're in the midst of starting to get it going now.
Real quick, when you're talking about energy, we actually just recently hired somebody at some study. And that's going to be part of his job description, looking at the lower energy nexus and how much energy we use with our water. It's an area we think we can concentrate
I'm just going to use the microphone on that. So introduce our next speaker. Thank you so much to Sarah and Laurene for their time.
Don't forget to take your water saving bucket. I'm going to put it by the door. I'll put it by those doors. And I really
our next speaker is a person who serves her community in a different way from our prior speakers who are elected officials. She has served as an activist and volunteer and will provide us with a perhaps different focus with respect to water. Christina Bertea is from Greywater Action, which is a collaborative of educators who teach residents and tradespeople about affordable and simple household water systems that dramatically reduce water use and foster sustainable cultures of water. Christina has a long career in the water industry. In the 1970s, she was the first woman admitted to a union plumbing apprenticeship in California and served a 4-year apprenticeship in local 159 plumbers and steam fitters. She became a plumbing contractor of her own in 1996 and has plumbed a number of alternative houses, including straw bale and rammed earth. In 2008, she joined Greywater Action, has been a workshop leader, installer, educator, and activist ever since. She's passionate about greywater reuse and rainwater harvesting. She also is interested in the spiritual aspects of water. She believes that water is life and that we can all honor and treasure water through our daily interactions with it. We invited her here to share her passion for greywater and to provide hands-on solutions for water scarcity that we can all do at home. Welcome, Christina, who is joining us via Zoom. So hopefully this will work.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes. I can hear you. Yes.
Yes.
I'm going to share my screen. Okay, well, thank you. I wonder if people need a break, actually. It's been kind of a long haul here. Is everyone okay if I just keep on going, or? I'm not.
Yes.
Okay. So we've just been hearing about the so many water issues in California. So we're just going to dive into what we can actually do to help there be enough water for everyone. And can we get rid of that bar that is across my screen, Kyoko, that we talked about before? Yeah, so the issue is making sure there's enough water to go around, including for fish and rivers and ecosystems. And so let's just pretend that water has consciousness. Then what can we do to demonstrate our love and appreciation for it in our own daily behavior? That's what we're going to be looking at. We're going to start with the low-hanging fruit, the trusty bucket. You know, in your shower, you can catch that cold water before it heats up. You can keep the bucket there, so in case some of the water comes out of the tub spout.
Christina?
Yes.
Christina, we're having problems here on site with the audio.
Okay, let me try this. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Oh. Is that better now?
Okay, can people hear me okay?
I think that's better.
Okay, so we're starting out with a low-hanging fruit, which would be the bucket. And so using a bucket in your shower to catch the cold water before it heats up, or using it to catch that water that leaks out of the tub spout while you're taking a shower, or some people just shower out of a bucket with a ladle and a sponge, and that sort of limits the amount of water that they use. So we're just looking at all the different ways that we can minimize our water use without, feeling deprived. Your kitchen sink, you can catch your rinse water in some kind of a bucket or some kind of container and take it outside to water your plants. That shower water you can use to flush your toilet or take it outside also. If you like to take baths, this was a really clever method this woman did. She has a flat ribbon that comes in through her window. It's attached to a hose. So when she opens her window, she can pull the hose in and attach it to a utility pump and pump out her bath water. And she just needs to remember to move her hose around the garden. But I thought that was really clever. Then I don't know how many of you know what your shower head rating is, the gallons per minute flow, but Niagara Conservation makes really excellent ones with as low as a 1.25 gallon per minute. And that's the one I have, and I don't feel the least bit deprived. And so when I'm taking my shower, I feel quite luxurious, and knowing also that it's going out to my gray water, to my elderberry tree. Your bathroom sinks, you can disconnect your trap and collect that water and use it to flush the toilet or use it outside. And this other image at the left, they're actually filling their tank with the water from their sink. And it's good to check and see how much water your toilet is using. The state mandate is 1.28 gallons or less, but there are toilets out there that only use 1 gallon. And then some of them actually use less than that, like 0.8 of a gallon. So you could consider getting a lower flush toilet. And if you're really attached to your old toilet, then consider putting a tank lid sink on it so that the water that's the perfectly clean, potable water that's coming in to either refill the bowl or refill the tank can be used to rinse your hands. And so it's serving a dual purpose that way. The toilet on the right comes already with that tank lid sink. It's Caroma, made in Australia, where they're very conscious of their water usage. Or you can even just give your toilet a rest and practice nutrient recovery and emergency preparedness. Because we've been talking about the possible impacts of earthquakes. In Christchurch, New Zealand, they actually had severe earthquakes that put their sewer out of commission for a year. And people had to figure out other systems. And the 2-bucket system was the preferred system. And they learned to compost the solids in wheelie bins safely. So you could explore this yourself. There's instructions online about how to actually process your own effluent and do it safely. And our urine is sterile, and it's an excellent fertilizer. The Rich Earth Institute in Vermont is really exploring how to use it for agriculture and collecting urine from people, and just doing a lot of research about it, how we can restore ourselves into the nutrient cycle. Because urine, because it's such an excellent fertilizer, the nutrients tend to go right through the sewage treatment plant out into our waterways and cause algal blooms. And so we need what came from the earth that we ate to go back to the earth when we're finished with it, not to go into water. So I've been working for many years with Greywater Action. Using water twice is nice, especially water from your tub, your shower, your sink, and your lawn. It's water that's really barely used, and it's perfectly safe for plants if you use the proper products. So, and it's good to have this chart sort of gives you an idea of average personal use per day. So you can see that if you send your washing machine water and your shower water out to the garden, you could eliminate about 1/4 of your municipal water use by using that for irrigation. So there are definitely ground rules that are spelled out in the code or addressed in the code, because we do have in California a Greywater code. The concerns are that people and animals not come in contact with the greywater, and you don't want to be spraying it, so you don't want people to be inhaling it. You don't want it surfacing or daylighting, and certainly not running off. Where it comes out into the garden needs to be covered with 2 inches of either mulch, gravel, soil, or a solid shield. The really important one to remember is that you don't store gray water for more than 24 hours, because it does become, well, I would use the word skanky. The bacteria that are in it would breed, and it becomes very unpleasant to deal with. The code does allow using gray water for growing edibles, but you can't grow plants where the edible part will be in touching the actual gray watered soil. So therefore no root vegetables. There's a valve or some kind of way to divert the gray water either from the garden or back to the sewer or septic. It's really critical, because there would be times when you wouldn't want it going to the garden, like if you're washing diapers or some kind of toxic chemicals. And that valve needs to be labeled clearly. There needs to be a maintenance manual that stays with the house. And gray water may be distributed in mulch basins, which we'll talk about. And of course, you wouldn't want to put toxins down the drain into your gray water because that would harm your soil. So product choice becomes really important, which is great, because if it's not good for your soil, it's probably not good for you either. So mulch basins, basically they're just a trench or a trough with very coarse wood chips or organic material in them. The idea being that there's lots of air spaces so that when the gray water goes into it, it spreads out and soaks in. It doesn't come up to the surface or pond or run off. Obviously, these are kind of clunky items in the landscape. So this is best for trees and shrubs and larger plants rather than it would be hard to do mulch basins with lawns and small plants like ground covers or flower gardens. And the gray water enters a mulch basin through a mulch shield, which serves many purposes. It marks the location of the outlet. It prevents roots from growing up into the tubing or the pipe because there's an airspace. The gray water free falls through air down onto the mulch. So that's the critical role of that mulch shield. And then it spreads out through that mulch and soaks in. So if you happen to have a washing machine outside, this is really a brilliant system. You just have a pipe going to each one of your fruit trees or trees that you want to irrigate, and you just move your washing machine drain hose from one pipe to another. Or you could have, if you're inside, you could have a dual outlet washing machine box and just move your drain hose from one either to the garden or to the regular sewer or septic. So if you're a renter, you could see if there's a window near your washing machine and stick the drain hose out the window and have it feed into a surge tank. Remember, we don't store gray water, so it's a surge tank because the water immediately starts draining out since there's no valve going out to the garden through a hose. And so, so the surge tank basically is just a space for that. If the machine is pumping really fast for that water to land and then more slowly drain out to the garden. The most accessible gray water system is the laundry landscape system. You can pretty much get the materials for between $200 and $300 and it's very easy to do yourself. So this has been really highly popular since the code changed and made gray water accessible to people. And you can see that there's a diverter valve there that the washing machine drain hose is attaching to, and one side of the diverter valve goes right back to where the drainage drain hose was going before, and the other side goes out to the garden. And this was the San Francisco PUC's manual with instructions, and you can see there the tubing leading to the mulch shield that we just talked about in a mulch basin. And that's how the gray water gets distributed in the garden. So the reason that, so this particular system, laundry and landscape, does not require a permit as long as you follow the guidelines. And the reason for that is that you're not actually altering any of the plumbing. All you're doing is connecting that washing machine drain hose to the valve and then giving the valve the option of sending it back to the sewer or out to the garden. And you can see there the 1-inch tubing going to 1/2-inch branches to mulch basins with mulch seeds. This was what it might look like inside the laundry room. You have either, whether you have a washing machine box, a standpipe, or a laundry sink, it can be set up. So, and notice that there's a valve instructions there posted on the wall next to the right-hand image. That's really important. This is what a laundry landscape could look like out in the garden with the 1-inch main and 1/2-inch branches going into those mulch shields that are set inside of mulch basins. Now, the thing that's so great about that washing machine system is that there is a pump already in the washing machine that helps to push the water out. If you want to use your gray water from your showers or your sinks, then it has to get there by some other means, ideally by gravity. So there's something called a branch drain gravity system, which has its limits. In some cases, your garden will be uphill, or your foundation will be too high, or whatever. But it's very elegant when it's possible to install it. And basically, the gravity just brings the gray water out, and it divides with double L's. And so that's how it splits, just flowing along by gravity. So here's a little clear image of it. So the gray water is, the diverter valve sends it out into those double L's, which you have a whole sequence of double L's that divide it into more and more places where it can go into the mulch shields and mulch basins. So it's a very elegant system, very simple. And once it's installed, it just hums along all by itself. Here's an example in a very small front yard in San Francisco. You can see on the left, the ABS pipe going to the double L's that are dividing it and spreading it out to quite a few different places where the mulch basins have been dug. And on the right, there's your ABS pipe bringing it into the mulch shield, which will, the bark mulch will be added more to fill in that mulch basin. So this is what it looked like after it was finished being installed. And then here it is on a low right after a year, looking very, very lush and successful. So if you have to go uphill, or you have to go really far with your gray water in order to get to the plants that you want to irrigate, then a pump system to mulch basins is the way to go. Again, the tank is considered a surge tank, not a storage tank. So the minute gray water starts accumulating in that tank, a float activated pump starts pumping it out. Again, it would be going into 1-inch tubing to 1/2-inch branches into those mulch shields and mulch basins. And you can see that there's an overflow from this tank in case the pump should fail that takes the gray water back to the sewer or septic. And there's a backwater valve on that so that if there was a sewage backup, it wouldn't go into the tank. So these systems work really well where you need to, irrigate uphill or a longer distance. And this is what it might look like. On the left, it's in a basement, and on the right, it's the surge tank has been dug into the crawl space. And the 1-inch PVC pipe is carrying the gray water, the pumped gray water out to the garden to 1-inch tubing. Now, some people really need to do drip irrigation. So this is the least expensive, simplest drip irrigation system that's available out there. The thing that's important to understand is that you cannot connect it to existing drip line because it will clog. If one wants to use this system, it has to be combined with drip line that has been designed for recycled water, because recycled water has a certain amount of solids in it. And so that it's designed not to clog. But this system has a 4-stage filtration, and it can work really well. And then there's a company that's been around for many years who have perfected using gray water for lawns, which is quite a specialized thing. They're based in LA. And they do sell kits. They're pretty elaborate systems because there are filters and then there's automatic back washing. So they do tend to be quite a bit more expensive, but if one is really, really attached to their lawn and you're producing a lot of gray water, that's a great way to use it. If you don't really need your gray water for irrigation, but you don't want it going into your septic system, or you just don't want it going to the sewage treatment plant, then it's pretty wonderful to create a constructed wetland, because you can have all these water-consuming, beautiful tropical plants that just eat up the water and transpire it. But that's fine because you want to use the water. You don't really need it for irrigation. And so what's happening is that the plants are growing in the gravel or rock substrate that the gray water passes through, and that the water level is kept 2 inches below the surface. So there's no mosquitoes growing. And of course, there's an overflow to be used elsewhere in the garden, but it can create a really beautiful landscape feature if you don't need the water for irrigation elsewhere. And people always want to know about raised beds. There's many ways to use gray water in raised beds. In the upper right-hand corner, they're using drip irrigation. In the middle, they're using little tiny mulch basins with mulch shields. And on the left, they've just punched holes in a 1-inch tubing or PVC, and then you can cut a 4-inch corrugated drain pipe to act as a mulch shield over it and protect the plants from coming into contact with it. So there are definitely ways to do raised beds with gray water. And this is, I think, one of the most important initiatives that we're working on in the state of California, actually in the country right now, trying to get it into the code, is that whenever there is a large remodel or a new construction, new residential construction being built, that Greywater ready plumbing be installed, meaning that the Greywater pipes be directed so that they're easily connected to if and when a person wants to install a Greywater system. So this is really essential, and it is going through the process of becoming, hopefully getting into the code in a couple of years, but a local jurisdiction could easily adopt rules about requiring it now, which certainly just makes sense, because otherwise, if plumbing is conventionally installed, it can be very expensive and very difficult to capture that gray water later on. So then we'll move on to rain. This is a beautiful poster by Hundred Wasser, a man way before his time, wonderful artist. Each raindrop is a kiss from heaven. And, you know, I'm just so tired of hearing, oh, you know, it doesn't rain anymore. And I think we really need to appreciate the rain that we are getting and be grateful for it. Because even though we're in a drought, which may be actually more like the new normal, in Livermore, 10 inches of rain would be about half of your normal annual rainfall. With 10 inches of rain and 1,000 square foot roof, which is really not that large, you could capture 6,000 gallons of rain. That's significant, even with a quarter of your normal annual rainfall. You could capture 3,000 gallons. The issue is where to put it. That's the real issue. So you could think about, well, what are those in between underutilized spaces or underneath spaces where you could put storage? In the right-hand corner, upper corner, there's a pillow tank, custom designed to go under a deck, a very large deck that held 2,000 gallons in a very, a very quiet and in an unobtrusive way. There's oftentimes spaces between buildings and fences that aren't really used, and you can line up barrels there, or you could just bury your water storage under the ground. And a lot of people have this sort of dread of ugly. They think that tanks are going to be really awful looking. And that's just a question of creativity. You can paint them, and why not? These are some pretty fun decorated tanks. Or you can do something else creative on them. This is a admittedly unattractive industrial looking tank up in the left-hand corner, but look what the metal artist did with it. It's celebrating monarch butterflies. So, and it's important for people to know that there is such a thing as a wet system. A wet system uses physics to get the rainwater from the roof to the tank. There's no pump involved. So it's just like the traps, P-traps under your fixtures in your house, under your sinks. Water goes down and it comes right back up again because water seeks its own level. And so if they're constructed properly, the water will just go down and then come right back up into the tank. And you can see this image in the lower right-hand corner, pretty funky looking system that could easily have been a wet system and looked much less jerry-rigged. So here's one just demonstrating how it can work. This person didn't want anything obstructing the overhead, so he didn't want a pipe going from the garage over to the tank. So it just went down and came right back up again, right into the tank, no pump. And this one is going to tanks that are quite a bit further away, but works flawlessly. It's often good to put a drain on the trap part of it so that that water doesn't sit there all summer long when it's not raining. This is a really excellent sort of just map of all the parts of a rainwater system. So you've got your catchment surface, typically a roof. You've got a gutter and a downspout. You can put various methods of sort of cleaning the water before it goes into the tank, like a leaf eater or a first flush. That just diverts stuff and diverts the dirtiest rinse water. And then it goes into usually the top of the tank. It comes out at the bottom in an outlet, and it always needs to have an overflow. And what's great about this drawing is that it has the overflow water going to a rain garden where that water is again captured, and in this case, infiltrated into the soil. And even the rain garden has an overflow. So I really appreciate this drawing. This is what the rain garden in my front yard looks like. We had a little workshop. So the tank overflows into the PVC pipes that's going down to the ground, comes up into the rain garden. It's designed to infiltrate the water before mosquitoes can breed. That overflows and turns to another spot where it soaks in, and then it goes to the curb strip where it soaks in again. So that water is intercepted at many points to make sure it infiltrates, because the best place to store water is in the soil. So here you see the gutter and the downspout going directly to a rain garden. The idea being that that rain garden has very porous soil, and it has plants whose roots help the water to infiltrate. So it's like it's in a depression, already a low point, with the soil that's very porous, and then the roots helping. If you happen to have property with more space, then you can dig what's considered to be a classic swale, which is a trench basically perfectly level on contour. So any water that's flowing across the surface from uphill will stop in that trench and sit there and soak in. And this is how you can basically rehydrate a complete hillside, because what's understood in that turquoise box there is that the water creates an underground lens of stored water that then kind of migrates underground downhill, in the process basically creating hydration for the entire landscape. So some people are really asking this question: can we rehydrate California? With methods that don't involve giant infrastructure projects that cost billions of dollars and many, many, many years, but things that can be really done on the ground, small and local. They anticipate that if we could accomplish that, we could reduce wildfires, raise the water table, lengthen the green growing season, moderate air temperatures, and restore biodiversity. All very, very, very desirable outcomes. So in thinking about your own property, how can you create a water retentive landscape? By infiltrating rainwater wherever you can after it overflows from your storage that you're putting in. And you know, spreading out your greywater from each fixture to a different part of your garden. And just rehydrating your landscape can help alleviate climate chaos, which is a big claim, but that's a whole other conversation. But what we're understanding is that to calm the climate, we need to restore small water cycles so that, you know, we have more local rain that soaks into the ground, and so that we have plants growing 24/7, round the clock, constantly transpiring. And the reason that it's important to have plants 24/7 is that they are feeding the microbes in the soil, which are the ones who sequester carbon from the atmosphere in pretty permanent forms. So it's the roots from plants exuding carbohydrates that they exchange with microbes, and then the microbes create humus, which helps store more water in the soil and hold nutrients and makes the whole system more resilient. So the key is having a hydrated landscape. So you want to keep all your rainwater on your property and capture the surface flow and reuse your greywater. That's the formula. Because if you have plants, they're transpiring and they're keeping the climate cooler. If you have bare soil, all that heat that's hitting the ground is going right back up into the atmosphere, increasing the temperature. Here's another image. Kiss the Ground does wonderful trainings about, you know, how we can really understand these dynamics. But where you have bare soil, the heat's going up, contributing to higher temperatures. Where you have plants, the transformation is contributing to cloud formation, and the roots of the plants are helping water infiltrate, and the microbes that the roots are feeding are sequestering carbon and the whole system is working the way that it evolved to work. So we just have to learn to work in harmony with it. I love this quote. It's not drought that causes bare ground, it's bare ground that causes drought. So take a look around at the land that you own or that you steward and think about where there's bare ground and how you can get something growing there year round. Because when it's bare, it's just putting that heat up. And also carbon is burning off from the soil. So you get the plants back on it, and the plants are working with the microbes and bringing that carbon back out of the atmosphere. So keep the carbon in your soil. Plant perennials so they're growing year round. Or use ground cover and mulch to protect the soil so it's not, getting hot and the carbon's not burning off. And avoid tillage. Reducing tillage is really key. What we're understanding now is that 2/3 of the carbon that used to be in the soil is now in the atmosphere because of our industrial agriculture practices. And our challenge now is bringing that carbon back out of the atmosphere into the soil with all kinds of benefits associated with it. So there's the water temple over there in Sonol, really beautiful. So go home and see if any of these things we just zoomed through are things that you can implement, like reusing your gray water, catching some rainwater, having it overflow into a rain garden, change your toilet to be more low flowing or stop using your toilet altogether. Start peeing out in the garden or catching your pee in a bucket and putting it out in the garden. Dig a swale to infiltrate some water. Build some humus in your soil by helping your plants feed microbes. Plant a food forest so that there's more cover of the soil and shade protection. And just, educate yourself about the relationship between soil and carbon and water, because they are all totally interlinked. And if we can get it right, we can really heal things. And just remember and honor water. So here's some resources. And thank you for listening. I'm sorry it's the end of the session and we've kind of been moving fast, but thank you for hanging in there if any of you did.
Thank you, Christina. It was very informative. We do have one question. I'm not sure I'm echoing. What is your opinion on low water landscape?
Low water landscape. I'm assuming that means planting plants that require as little water as possible, that are more, I think planting native plants is the very best way to go, because all of the pollinators and the insects and the birds and all of the critters that live here evolved with those plants. And so the best thing to do is to plant natives and support those ecosystems and communities of creatures that all evolve together. So to the extent that low water use landscapes include native plants, that's great.
Are there any other questions? I don't see any, so thank you, Christina. That
really no
concludes our meeting today.
Is that possible?
I just want to make a couple of quick announcements. We do have some forums coming up in advance of the November election. You can find information on our website, livermoreindivisible.org. Sorry.
Did I lose sound?
I lost sound.